Hello, and welcome to Recording 4 of the Princeton Review WordSmart 2 Vocabulary Building Program.
The first group of words we're going to cover is called Old News. As you can hear, this group has two parts. We'll examine each half individually, then review the group as a whole and mix things up a bit.
Along with the groups of words and, of course, the definitions that accompany them, we'll also supply a series of speeches and stories to help further illuminate the meanings of the words and to help you memorize them.
Oh my God.
What is it? You've got to tell me.
Japan has
Yeah?
bombed Pearl Harbor. There's going to be another world war.
Again?
What do you mean?
They bombed it again?
No.
But Liz,
What?
that happened in 1941.
It did?
Uh-huh. That's old news, Liz. We already had that war. That was World War II.
You're right.
Liz, we're not at war. We're definitely not at war with Japan, despite American paranoia.
Oh, that's good.
You really scared me.
Sorry, I was kind of scared myself. I thought, here it comes. This is going to be the end.
You did manage, though, to introduce our new section, Old News.
Clever title.
Yeah. Old referring to things of the past, and news, which covers things that are new or reports about things that are happening.
In poetry, they call that an oxymoron. It's a condensed paradox, like Little Big Man or Bittersweet or White Chocolate or Jumbo Shrimp.
I always remember oxymoron because things that are contradictory make you feel moronic. They don't make sense. How can something be old and new?
Let's keep it simple then and start with news. I don't want to confuse you.
You already got me pretty confused over your Pearl Harbor announcement.
Let's get back to that for a moment.
Okay.
When it happened, all of America knew that war couldn't be avoided any longer. It was such a horror and a disaster that it was a sign, a harbinger of what was to come.
A harbinger is an indication, a first sign. Pearl Harbor was a harbinger, an omen of a long and difficult war.
A harbinger can be good also. When Ashley drove to Vegas, she passed 12 red Ferraris on the way. She took it as a harbinger of good luck and couldn't wait to get to the roulette table.
Circling vultures are usually perceived as harbingers of death for any suffering animals below them.
Another word for omen is portent. A portent indicates something about to happen. As the Californians drove along the San Andreas Fault, the shakings and rumblings served as a portent of the earthquake to come.
Portent is generally used to describe a coming event that is momentous and dramatic, whereas harbinger can be used to describe something small or something positive. The little pink blossoms were a harbinger of spring. The sound of thunderous stampeding was a portent of the nightmarish attack of the dinosaurs.
Portent is a noun. If you call the sound of that stampede portentous, you are using it as an adjective.
Right. When Orson Welles made the portentous announcement that aliens had invaded Earth, Americans panicked. Another word that means to foreshadow is presage. This word can be used as either a verb or a noun. As a noun, it means an omen.
When Darlene told Dan to start picking up his laundry and cooking his own dinner, it was a presage of the change in their relationship.
Presage is used more frequently as a verb. The flying silverware presaged yet another family battle. The director told the actors not to worry because a bad dress rehearsal presages a terrific opening night. Too bad the theater burnt down before they had a chance to find out if he was right.
I once considered being an actress.
Did you really?
Yep, but I had these ominous dreams all the time that made me think I better stay away from the theater.
Your dreams were bad and portended doom?
That is what ominous means.
Well, I know that. I just wanted to make sure everyone out there also knows. So you had these ominous, menacing, portentous dreams.
Yeah, they scared the daylights out of me.
Tell me your dreams, Liz. I will tell you what I think.
Well, Mr. Freud, it was always the same. I was performing in West Side Story, playing Maria. But every time I started singing, I feel pretty, a bucket of pig's blood was dumped all over me.
Well, that is an ominous dream, all right. In psychology, we call that a Carrie complex. Does your mother like to burn candles?
No, but her name is Lori.
Aha! Just as I suspected.
Now, where were we?
Ominous, I believe.
Oh, yes.
Big Al Isoposa had an ominous expression on his face as he walked into the social club. From the look on his face, the bartender knew that the gang was going to hit soon and hit hard.
Ominous is related to the word omen. An omen is a sign. Just remember the film The Omen. Everything that happens in The Omen is ominous.
Let's move on to fatalist. Are you a fatalist, Liz?
No way. I believe that I have the power to control my fate. A fatalist believes everything in the future is already determined, and nothing can be done to change the outcome.
That's a pretty gloomy outlook. What's the point of trying if you can't make things better?
Absolutely. Fatalists are very negative. My great-aunt Ruby Ann was a fatalist. She was so sure someone was going to rob her house and bash her head in with a sledgehammer that she didn't even try to be careful. She never locked her doors.
Oh, what happened to her?
Someone robbed her house and bashed her head in with a sledgehammer.
Liz!
Sorry, just a little gruesome humor to spice up the pot. The word fate doesn't necessarily imply a bad future, but when you are a fatalist, you believe in fate so strongly that you give up responsibility for your future completely.
Right. That kind of person is described as being fatalistic. She's sure that nothing she does can make a difference, either good or bad. Que sera, sera. Whatever will be, will be.
There's yet another word meaning to serve as an omen. It's augur. To augur is to predict or foretell. When Lendl aced every serve in his first game, his fans were sure it augured victory for the tennis player.
When Marta Nepo started singing flat notes during the second aria of Traviata, it didn't augur well for the rest of the long evening of opera. I have a weird mnemonic device for augur. When I hear augur and when I look at it, I find the word August. August is the last month of summer, a month that tells me autumn is coming. August is an augur for autumn.
I think that's a really clever mnemonic device. Do you mind if I borrow it?
Take it, darling, a little gift from me to you.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Who is that man in tights carrying a trumpet and marching towards us? Is that a herald?
It looks like a herald.
Yes, I'm quite sure it is a herald.
A herald, no doubt about it, and a strapping young herald he is.
Talk to him, Lizzie.
Herald, oh, herald!
Yes, ma'am.
What are you?
I'm a herald, ma'am.
Yes, I know that, but what on earth is a herald?
A herald is one who proclaims important news or brings information of something to come.
Do you have any important news for me?
Sorry, no really big news.
Kind of a bargain basement herald, eh? Can't you at least show me how to use herald in a sentence?
A robin redbreast is a herald of spring. Its song brings tidings of a warmer season to come.
You've used herald as a noun.
I can use it as a verb, too. I do know how to herald. Good King Ling heralded his victory over evil King Snafu by parading through town with his harem, throwing rose petals before him.
Excellent, Dick. Now I'm going to do some heralding of my own. Here's the last word of the news section.
The word is forebode. Forebode means to be an omen of, to predict or foretell, usually something bad. I can understand why you don't want to face it alone.
Every time we use accents, I have a foreboding, a bad feeling that we'll never speak normally again.
Every time I see a little kid start clenching his fists and pursing his lips, I know it forebodes a temper tantrum.
Sometimes forebode means to predict or prophecy. Sorin, the sorcerer, forebode tragedy every time he stared into his crystal ball.
Forebode sounds as if it were the past tense of the verb forbid, meaning to prohibit, but the past tense of forbid is forbade. Mistress Morley forbade Johannes from speaking of his forebodings. She said, "Don't bring bad luck by expecting it."
That's it for the words having to do with news, the future, and omens. Let's have a quick recap or a nightcap. Ready?
Set.
Harbinger.
A precursor, an indication of what is to come.
Portent.
An omen, a sign of something coming in the future.
Presage.
To foreshadow or predict.
Ominous.
Threatening, portending doom.
Fatalist.
One who believes that future events are already determined and humans are powerless to change them.
Augur.
To serve as an omen or sign. Predict.
Herald.
A royal proclaimer, one who announces news.
Forebode.
To indicate the threatening likelihood of. To prophecy.
Terrific. You were marvelous.
Too marvelous for words.
No, just marvelous enough for those words. And now it's time to hear them in a speech.
Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou, Romeo? Oh boy, I got a bad feeling. I don't know, it's kind of like a knot in my stomach or something. Don't get me wrong, I'm crazy about Romeo, but when I danced with him at the ball, he kept tripping. It made me nervous, like it might be some harbinger of what's to come. He talked sweet enough, but I've got this sense of foreboding. It's like I know where the story's headed, and I don't want to go there. Tell me something. If a guy kisses you at a dance and then doesn't call right away, does this presage disaster for the relationship? I don't know about these things. I'm new at this game. Furthermore, the atmosphere at the dance was a little ominous, as if there was about to be a disaster. No one touched the punch. And listen, it gets worse, a lot worse. Our families don't get along. Just yesterday, the Montagues sent a herald to our house to announce, "The Capulets are gonna fry!" It's bigger than a problem with the way we mow our lawn. They want to kill us. This does not augur well for the future of our relationship. I don't mean to be a fatalist, but I'm not sure if marriage is in the cards. Then, Romeo said this thing that scared the daylights out of me. He said,
"Relax. If things get too messy, you can pretend to poison yourself and let them bury you. I'll come get you."
Now that's a portentous speech if ever I heard one. Coming from the guy who trips when he dances? Oh dear, I've got to get off this balcony. I'm getting dizzy.
Thank you, Juliet. Was that speech in iambic pentameter, Liz?
I don't think so.
Personally, I think it was from Shakespeare's rough draft.
Just goes to show a little revision can really help. Well, we've conquered the news half of old news. Let's backtrack and take a gander at the old half, words that describe the past or things from the past.
What about the words in the new section?
We're done with them. We're moving forward.
But I like those words.
Well, so did I, Dick, but we have to keep plowing ahead.
But I'm feeling
What?
nostalgic for those words. They were beautiful.
I agree, but don't let yourself be overcome by feelings of nostalgia, Dick. Don't get carried away by sentimental longing for the past. It's over.
But they were so wonderful. I felt at home there.
That's a symptom of nostalgia, or longing for things that aren't present. Nostalgia can be another word for homesickness.
When two old lovers meet, they often become nostalgic, remembering the pleasures they once shared.
And forgetting the fights.
Naturally, people who are nostalgic remember the good things.
Perennial means continual, happening time after time or each year. Gardeners love perennial flowers. They blossom again and again without being replanted.
Bob Bobson was a perennial candidate for mayor. Every year he ran with a platform advocating that apple bobbing and bobsledding should be mandatory activities in school. He was also a perennial loser.
Candy corn is a perennial favorite at Halloween. Does anyone really eat it?
If you put candy in the refrigerator, you can perpetuate its life. Perpetuate means to make last or keep from perishing. When individuals make racist jokes and comments, false stereotypes are perpetuated.
The next word is archives. Archives are where historical documents or materials are stored. This word should always be plural.
Professor Dewberry searched in the archives of the National Library of Paleography. He was searching for an ancient document on Egyptian trench-digging techniques.
The word archives can also refer to the documents found in the storage space. The curator was very protective of the university's archives.
The individual who curates or cares for archives is called an archivist. The archivist got a headache just looking at the chaos in the archive. Documents covered the floor in no discernible order.
Many archives store archaic, or extremely old documents. If something is described as archaic, it means that it is either ancient or outdated. Archaic civilizations disappeared many years ago.
The methods used by the president of information research firm were positively archaic. He insisted that all information be stored in gigantic filing cabinets. No computers were permitted. In linguistics, the archaic meaning is one which is no longer used. Many times a word will have one meaning. Later, that meaning changes and the first meaning seems archaic.
Shall I introduce the next word?
I won't let you.
Are you being modern or archaic?
Try to introduce the next word and you'll know.
The word is retrospect.
Right. Retrospect is a review, a looking back. While he was growing up, Charlie thought he had been a good brother, but in retrospect he realized that he had been cruel and unkind.
Retrospect can be broken into parts very simply. The prefix retro, meaning backward or back. Then the root spect, from the Latin spectare, to look at, as in spectacle. When you look at something in retrospect, it has to have happened already. You are always looking back at it.
A retrospective is a review of an artist's work. There was a wonderful Picasso retrospective at the museum. It covered all of his fascinating periods.
A young director doesn't usually get a retrospective of his films. He simply doesn't have enough to look back at.
Isn't it sad that many directors and other artists only get retrospectives posthumously or after they've died?
Phew! 2 vocabulary words in a row. Go for 3 and you get the door prize.
All right, here goes. Archivists who perennially create posthumous retrospectives perpetuate that nostalgic view that only archaic work of dead artists deserves to be shown.
Oh, my word.
I did it.
To our listeners out there, you might want to play that section one more time. If you understood that sentence, you're golden.
The last word should be something suitable for an ending.
How about epilogue?
Perfect, I think. What exactly is an epilogue?
Well, an epilogue can be a short poem or speech spoken directly to the audience at the end of a play. In many Shakespearean epilogues, Shakespeare cleverly asks the audience to clap for the play.
On the other hand, a prologue appears at the beginning of the play. It helps to draw the audience into the theatrical world. Many authors use epilogues to tell readers what the eventual fates of the main characters would be. 3 years later, Tom was dead, Jenny was pregnant, and Martha was a ski instructor.
I think it's that magic time again.
Yes, it is, Liz, and you're up. I'll give you the words we've introduced, which all fall into the section Old in Old News. They all have to do with that which is past or finished. Here we go. Nostalgia.
A sentimental longing for the past.
Perennial.
Continual, happening again and again.
Perpetuate.
To make last, to keep from perishing, to continue without interruption.
Archives.
A place where historical documents or materials are stored, or the documents in that place.
Archaic.
Extremely old, ancient, or outdated.
Retrospect.
Looking back, a review.
Posthumously.
Occurring after death, published after an author's death.
Epilogue.
An afterword in a book or a speech at the end of a play.
It's that special time again. Gather around the campfire and hear a speech where all the vocabulary words are used in context. Why not get out your marshmallows and snuggle in for a bit? Here to speak for us, summoned back from the nether regions, is the ghost of the poet Hauser. Yes, I'm the ghost of Hauser. Chances are you don't know who the heck I am. You all know that other Greek poet, that blind fellow Homer, and I'll admit, a Hauser's not a Homer. He's got a huge fan club perpetuating the idea that he's the big Greek cheese. Everybody and their mother knows Homer, but who knows Hauser? I know that Greek epic poems are somewhat archaic. You say you have the time to read only one, so you all read the Odyssey. Not one of you reads my epic poem, The Trip. Hunt through the museum archives sometime and see if you find a copy. My poem, The Trip, is a lot easier to read. No fancy schmancy words. Odyssey schmodyssey. Call a spade, it's a trip, for goodness sake. I'm the working man's epic poet. I'm not the nostalgic type, but I'll tell you something. There was a time some folks used to shout, Hauser, Hauser, he's our man, writes it simply if he can. In retrospect, I guess I should have used more advertising. Homer always had a spiffy poster with pretty colors announcing his poems. I guess that's why he was a perennial favorite with the ladies. I tried not to trouble myself over it. I thought, quality endures. I figured I'd be a posthumous hit. Someday folks would figure out who was really telling it like it was. Hauser, not Homer, that sing-songy phony baloney flash in the pan. But you're all still reading the Odyssey, and no one is looking at The Trip. So let this little speech stand as my epilogue. You read what you want, but next time you go to pick up the Odyssey, you look at how long it is. Then do yourself a favor. Go get The Trip.
Well, now that we've heard all the words in context, it's time to review both sets which comprise the section Old News. First you get the word, then you get the pause.
That pause is for you, the listener. Try to think of a definition or place the word in its appropriate section, either old or news.
So, word, pause, then monologue line containing that same word, and finally a definition and example sentence.
Liz, It's time to begin. Go to it.
Harbinger. It made me nervous, like it might be some harbinger of what's to come.
A harbinger is a precursor, an indication of what is to come. When Tootie found the dead chipmunk, she saw it as a harbinger of the great rodent plague to come.
Archives.
Hunt through the museum archive sometime and see if you find a copy.
Archives are where historical materials or documents are stored. After examining the archives, the historian was pleased to find that the materials were being properly cared for. Perpetuate.
He's got a huge fan club, perpetuating the idea that he's the big Greek cheese.
To perpetuate is to make something last, to keep from perishing. In order to perpetuate the myth that she didn't age, Katie dyed her hair black.
Ominous.
Furthermore, the atmosphere at the dance was a little ominous, as if there was about to be a disaster. No one touched the punch.
Ominous is threatening or portending doom. The giant black clouds in the shape of devils and skulls seemed ominous in the summer sky. Augur.
They want to kill us. This does not augur well for the future of our relationship.
To augur is to serve as an omen or a sign, to foretell. The ballerina's clumsy pirouette did not augur well for the upcoming production of Giselle.
Nostalgia.
I'm not the nostalgic type, but I'll tell you something. There was a time some folks used to shout, "Hauser, Hauser, he's our man, writes it simply if he can."
Nostalgia is a sentimental longing for the past. Drew got nostalgic when he saw his old seesaw and pitchfork. Ah, to be young again.
Forebode.
He talks sweet enough, but I've got this sense of foreboding. It's like I know where this story's headed and I don't want to go there.
To forebode is to be an omen of, predict, or foretell. The little girl forebode the downfall of the evil dictator soon after she began speaking in tongues.
Perennial.
Homer always had a spiffy poster with pretty colors announcing his poems. I guess that's why he was a perennial favorite with the ladies.
Something that is perennial happens again and again, continually. In March, we attended the perennial march for March, and we always wore yellow sneakers. Epilogue.
So let this little speech stand as my epilogue.
An epilogue is a speech at the end of a play or a written passage at the end of a book. In the epilogue, the author claimed that he had been under the possession of demonic cocktail waitresses while writing the novel.
Fatalist.
I don't mean to be a fatalist, but I'm not sure if marriage is in the cards.
A fatalist is one who believes that fate is determined and humans are unable to alter it. Treat refused to give money to charities because he was a true fatalist. He figured poor people were meant to be poor and there was nothing he could do about it. Portent.
He said, "Relax. If things get too messy, you can pretend to poison yourself and let them bury you. I'll come get you." Now that's a portentous speech.
A portent is an omen, a sign of something coming in the future. The lunatic stood on the bench making portents of the downfall of civilization and the rise of the cocktail roach.
Archaic.
I know that Greek epic poems are somewhat archaic.
To be archaic is to be ancient or outdated. When Professor Souvlaki found the archaic manuscript in ancient Mesopotamia, she quickly translated it into Greek. Posthumous.
I figured I'd be a posthumous hit. Someday folks would figure out who was really telling it like it was. Hauser.
If something occurs posthumously, it occurs after death. After he was struck by lightning, the young author's writings were discovered under his mattress and published posthumously.
Herald.
Just yesterday, the Montagues sent a herald to our house to announce, "The Capulets are gonna fry."
A herald is a royal proclaimer, or someone or something that brings news. The herald of a new day in New York is the screeching and slamming of the sanitation truck below my window. Many newspapers take the title, The Herald. Presage.
If a guy kisses you at a dance and then doesn't call right away, does this presage disaster for the relationship?
To presage is to serve as an omen or foretell. The meteorologist was unsuccessful at presaging the weather. Whenever she predicted sun, it never failed to rain.
Retrospect.
In retrospect, I guess I should have used more advertising. Homer always had a spiffy poster with pretty colors announcing his poems.
Retrospect means a looking back or a review. Although the party seemed like a good idea at the time, in retrospect it was inappropriate. Well, that concludes old news. Now we'd better get going. The next group is Rich Man, Poor Man.
Rich man first. Aristocratic gets us off to a rollicking good start. Liz, my little babushka, why don't you stop holding us all hostage here and tell us what aristocratic means?
Sure thing, Dick. Aristocratic has, as you may have become used to, a couple of meanings. Technically, anyone who's aristocratic is of noble birth. They're royalty of some kind. But there's another meaning, and this one is usually for people who aren't really of noble birth, but who just act like they are. When we call them aristocratic, we really mean having a noble bearing.
Prince Charles, for example, is a true aristocrat. He is of noble birth, and he's rich as the day is long. The prince's favorite sport, polo, is called an aristocratic sport because it's typically played by noble, privileged types.
You're not automatically considered an aristocrat, even if you become a master of polo and other equestrian sports. You have to carry yourself regally, in other words, with class.
Equestrian means having to do with horseback riding. I always tune in when equestrian events are on TV. The horses are beautiful, and I love those bright silk shirts the jockeys wear.
Equestrian, which we now know is about horseback riding, is also a noun, and it's what you call a person who rides horses.
Bjorn wanted very much to be an equestrian, but his 6'9" frame and lack of fingers made it impractical. Josie, on the other hand, was a great equestrienne, which is the female version of the word equestrian.
The reason equestrian shows up in the rich man group is because horses are generally the accoutrements of wealth. What, you may ask, are accoutrements? These are trappings, accessories, sometimes clothes that are worn for fashion's sake or because they are appropriate.
Floor-length gowns, beaded handbags, limousines, these are the accoutrements of a woman attending the opening night of the opera.
Certain people are given to certain accoutrements. They can function as parts of a uniform. A gun, for example, is a policeman or policewoman's essential accoutrement. In other words, you don't have to be a magnate in order to have accoutrements. A magnate is what you call a very rich, very powerful, very successful business person.
Rockefeller, Carnegie, Vanderbilt, Astor, these are some of the great magnates in American history. They made extraordinary amounts of money and influenced the very way in which our nation took shape. They are classic versions of magnates. You may have heard the term perks, as in free lunch is one of the perks that comes with the job.
Yes. Perks is really short for perquisite, which is any privilege that goes along with a job. A personal chef and a physical trainer are some of the perquisites of running a movie studio.
Be sure not to confuse perquisite with prerequisite, which has an almost opposite meaning, a necessity. A personal jet is a perquisite of the job, not a prerequisite. It's great to have a jet, but you don't necessarily need one to get the job done.
One of the things that most inspired Jocko to become an entrepreneur was the dream of perquisites that he would enjoy when his ice pick business really took off. An entrepreneur is an independent business person, one who starts and runs and assumes the risk of operating an independent business.
Eileen was certain that there was a market for latex fixtures out there, so she became an entrepreneur. She designed, built, and marketed her fixtures until she was rich, rich, rich. Then, like any smart entrepreneur, she sold her business for a small fortune, and now she lives off her investment income. If the noun is entrepreneur, then the adjective is entrepreneurial. That's what you call an entrepreneur, or somebody who just acts like one. Rocky was entrepreneurial. He dreamed of owning his own opera company and becoming an impresario.
An impresario is a person who manages large public entertainment, such as opera, concerts, and festivals. Impresarios are known for their colorful personalities and forceful egos. Monsieur Simpson, the impresario of the Springfield Opera Company, loved to chew on cigars and eat goldfish right out of the bowl. In some cases, a wealthy person with a longing for a more creative existence will simply buy themselves an orchestra and, overnight, become an impresario. Such acquisitive behavior is typical of the very rich.
They are not like you and me. Acquisitive, by the by, is the last of the rich man words, and it means seeking or tending to acquire. You can hear the word acquire in acquisitive. It's often a polite way of saying greedy.
In America, the 1980s were known for being, perhaps more than anything else, an acquisitive decade, with no regard for the future and the price we'd have to pay. People bought more than they could afford, and look where our acquisitiveness has gotten us now.
Yeah, it's gotten us to this quick review of the words from the rich man half of Rich Man, Poor Man. This time you give the words and I'll give the concise definitions, okay?
Yeah, that's okay. Go ahead.
Equestrian.
Having to do with horseback riding.
Aristocratic.
Of noble birth, very refined, or just acting that way.
Magnate.
A very rich, powerful, and influential business person.
Accoutrements.
Trappings, fashionable accessories, equipment.
Impresario.
A person who manages large-scale entertainment such as opera and concerts.
Perquisite.
A privilege that comes with a job.
Entrepreneur.
A person who starts and assumes the risk for her own business venture.
Acquisitive.
Tending to acquire things. Greedy.
Done.
For Rich Man, we bring you world-famous Texas billionaire Hoss Nouveau.
Thank you kindly, little lady. Now let's see. When exactly did I get so darn rich? Couldn't have been long after that equestrian show that came to town. Looking at all those pretty thoroughbreds and their fancy-looking riders, I just knew I'd have to get rich somehow. The accoutrements of wealth were just too much for my heart to resist. I just had to have me some of those horses, those cars, and those pretty women. Now, I don't mean to paint a picture of myself as a purely acquisitive person, mind you. Greed was never my only motive. But I must admit, I liked my toys. And when I became aware of the kind of perquisites that accompany billionaire status, well, my mind was made up. I mean, I can get sushi brought in here whenever I like. Lord knows, when you're a magnate, you not only have money and success, you have real influence. And I can get things done, yes I can. So, how did I get started? Well, being the entrepreneurial type, I decided to go into business for myself. At the horse show, I discovered that there was a need for industrial-strength pooper scoopers. I mean, those horses can go. So, I gambled and I won. Turns out circuses, rodeos, and even petting zoos were hot for my stuff. Now look at me. I'm Hoss Nouveau, the manure removal king. If there's such a thing as Texas aristocracy, well, you're looking at it right here. Nobility is all in the mind, that's what I say. Now, I've decided to start my own arts festival, of which I intend to be impresario. I'm going to call it the Hoss Nouveau's Big Shot Show. What do you think about that?
I think somebody's done lost their mind, that's what I reckon. We'd best be on our way and cover the words from the poor man half of the group.
Having just heard from the one and only Texas billionaire Hoss Nouveau, we are anxious to look at the words from the other half of the group, poor man. So let's get to it.
The first word is destitute, which, like many of the words in this group, implies poverty. But unlike most of the other words we'll encounter in the poor man group, destitute means more than just poor. It means penniless, broke, having absolutely nothing at all. And, once again, destitute also has a figurative value as well. On its own, it means having no money, or, shall we say, no net worth whatsoever. But destitute can also be applied to any item or quality that is utterly lacking.
Psychopaths are often described as being morally destitute, which suggests that they are without any built-in understanding of what is right and what is wrong.
To subsidize is to give financial aid or make a financial contribution. When I run low on money, I often turn to my parents for a temporary subsidy. It's painful, but it's not as bad as starving to death.
There are many programs which offer subsidies to artists who can't make a living selling their art. Many of those programs are run by large corporations, however, and they often place limitations on the nature of the art itself.
What a bummer. I know many an artist who would rather become a mendicant than take dirty money from a corporation who would tell them what they can and cannot create. A mendicant is a beggar. Mendicant has a secondary definition that means friar or monk. A mendicant, then, implies a beggar who has, even to some small extent, chosen his poverty.
The presence of so many mendicants in the cities of the world's richest nation is a sorry sight indeed. Many of them have been impoverished by the very systems designed to help them.
Be careful with impoverish. Its meaning is very specific. Impoverish means to cause or reduce to poverty.
Dino has impoverished himself by blowing all his money on lottery tickets. Somebody should let him know that the odds are better that he'll be struck by lightning than that he'll win.
Our current love of television and other mindless pursuits has impoverished our nation's intellectual life.
Oh, relax. You watch as much television as anyone, so get off your intellectual high horse. You're just as plebeian as the rest of us.
Ooh, good. Plebeian means common, bourgeois, low class, or even vulgar. You may remember aristocratic from the first half of the rich man, poor man group. Well, plebeian is its opposite. Abby pretends to turn her nose up at such plebeian pleasures as baseball and barbecues, but underneath her stiff exterior beats the passionate heart of a regular low-class gal.
Let's stay the course, if we may, and look at the next poor man word, impecunious. Whenever you see the root pecune, you're in the realm of money. Pecuniary, for example, means relating to money. Impecunious, therefore, means without money or broke.
Excuse me, I am temporarily impecunious. Could you spot me a few $1,000s? Belmondo's dream of becoming the newest, biggest heartthrob around evaporated when the hair gel company that had subsidized him discovered that he had a criminal record. Without the hair gel money, he was impecunious. Now he just sits.
Well, many a money-making scheme has left the schemer impecunious. Then, as often as not, they turn to peculation or embezzlement. Notice that root, pecu, is in there again. Now, why, I ask you again, is it better to say impecunious than it is just to say broke?
Because, Dick, because it's fun. That's all. That's the only reason. It's fun to be able to use as many words as you can. End of story. Capiche?
Yeah, capiche. I think we should do the very last word in this group so that you'll leave me alone. I mean, if I'm not allowed to ask a simple question, then what's the use? Here's the last word. Proletariat. The proletariat is what you call the entire class of industrial workers. In George Orwell's masterpiece, 1984, he describes a world in which a nameless mass of workers called proles work in silence under the all-seeing, all-knowing eye of Big Brother. The word prole, of course, is short for proletariat. Only in Orwell's vision, menial labor was all that the proletariat was allowed to do.
So, with proletariat, we end the second half of Rich Man, Poor Man. We'll, of course, polish it off with a recap of the poor man words, a speaker, and a final, all-out, wake-em-up, shake-em-up review of all the words in the group.
Here's the recap. Nothing fancy, just the words and their definitions.
Impoverish.
To cause or reduce to poverty. To make poor.
Impecunious.
Without money. Broke.
Subsidize.
To give financial aid, to make a monetary contribution.
Plebeian.
Common, low class, bourgeois, or vulgar.
Proletariat.
The industrial blue collar or working class.
Mendicant.
A beggar.
Destitute.
Completely and utterly without means, be they financial or otherwise. And now, with the rather unglamorous duty of putting us through the poor man ringer, is a woman who wasn't always, as they say, cassée. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, direct from the stage of the fabulous Starlight Room in the beautiful Comfy Inn in downtown Cleveland, Ohio, it's the 60s singing sensation. You knew her as a superb. It's Marcia Nightingale.
Hi, thank you. Yes, thanks very much. No, sit. What a pleasure it is to see you all tonight. I'm so glad to be here in the beautiful Starlight Lounge. Actually, I'm so washed up I couldn't get work anywhere else. After conquering the world in 1964, look at me now. Once I was a rich superstar. Now I'm a virtual mendicant begging for work. Yes, mine's a sad story. And the very industry that made me wealthy used me up, spit me out, and left me impoverished. It's especially hard to find yourself impecunious after you've enjoyed so much extraordinary, well-financed fun in the sun. And the Superbs were big, honey. Don't you doubt it. And who do you think it was who subsidized the group when we first got started? That's right. Before the record company showed up, it was my hard-won cash which kept us afloat. What's more, I wrote most of the group's biggest hits myself, only I wasn't smart enough at the time to keep a hold of the rights. I looked upon attention to legal matters as being too plebeian for me. I couldn't be bothered with contracts when I had a fitting to go to, Not with Miss Deandra Floss getting in everybody's light, you know. I had to be there to guard my share of the limelight. Miss Floss eclipsed us all. Now, I'm almost destitute. I have only the clothes on my back and a used 79 Cadillac Seville. So you can see how glad I am to be here singing for all you lovely people at the Starlight Lounge. I'm proud to be a member of the showbiz proletariat, out working for an honest living in the entertainment trenches, and it is good to be back.
Wow, I forgot about her. Was she ever hot? Well, that wraps up Rich Man, Poor Man. Now we can stroll down memory lane, mixing things up a bit in our review.
Remember to fill in the definition, or at least the category of each word during the pauses. Ready or not, here they come.
Impresario.
Now I've decided to start my own arts festival, of which I intend to be impresario.
An impresario is a person who manages large-scale entertainment such as opera and concerts. Ed Sullivan was a great impresario because he put together an amazing compendium of acts on his Sunday night show.
Impoverish.
And the very industry that made me wealthy used me up, spit me out, and left me impoverished.
To impoverish is to cause or reduce to poverty, to make poor. My lavish spending on my dog Fluff left me impoverished, so I took her to the dog pound and finally paid off my bills.
Magnate.
And Lord knows, when you're a magnate, you not only have money and success, you have real influence.
A magnate is a very rich, powerful business person. Estee Lauder is a well-known cosmetics magnate. Ralph Lauren has become a fashion magnate.
Impecunious.
It's especially hard to find yourself impecunious after you've enjoyed so much extraordinary, well-financed fun in the sun.
Impecunious means broke, without money. My impecunious brother keeps asking me for money, but since I just lost a bundle on the stock market, I'm in an impecunious situation myself.
The next word is entrepreneur.
Well, being the entrepreneurial type, I decided to go into business for myself.
An entrepreneur is a person who starts and assumes the risk for his or her own business venture. Al Capone was an entrepreneur in the shakedown business, but he lost it all when he forgot to pay his taxes.
Plebeian.
I looked upon attention to legal matters as being too plebeian for me. I couldn't be bothered with contracts when I had a fitting to go to.
Plebeian is common, low-class, bourgeois, or vulgar. Street walking could be considered a plebeian profession. It's hardly the way for a nice girl to earn money.
Equestrian.
Looking at that equestrian show with all those pretty thoroughbreds and their fancy-looking riders, I just knew I'd have to get rich somehow.
Equestrian, having to do with horseback riding. I've always gotten a thrill seeing the Olympic equestrian team compete. All those cute little horsies jumping over fences.
Subsidize.
And who do you think it was who subsidized the group when we first got started? That's right. Before the record company showed up, it was my hard-won cash which kept us afloat.
To subsidize means to give financial aid, to make a monetary contribution. Pedro grumbled when his daughter asked him to subsidize her trip to the Netherlands. He thought she should pay for it herself.
Accoutrements.
The accoutrements of wealth were too much for my heart to resist. I just had to have some of those horses.
Accoutrements are trappings, fashionable accessories, or equipment. Mimi enjoyed the accoutrements of ballet, especially the tutus.
Proletariat.
I'm proud to be a member of the showbiz proletariat, out working for an honest living in the entertainment trenches.
The proletariat is the industrial, blue-collar, or working class. Karl Marx glorified the proletariat in his seminal work, Das Kapital.
Acquisitive.
I don't mean to paint a picture of myself as a purely acquisitive person, mind you. Greed was never my only motive.
Acquisitive means tending to acquire things, greedy. Children are usually acquisitive little creatures. They want everything that's yours. Perquisite.
And when I became aware of some of the perquisites that accompany billionaire status, my mind was made up.
A perquisite is a privilege or benefit that comes with a job. Mavis loved the perquisites of working in the record industry. She got to meet every rock star she ever idolized, including Prince.
Mendicant.
Once I was a rich superstar. Now I'm a virtual mendicant. begging for work.
A mendicant is a beggar. Mendicant sometimes has religious overtones, as when someone joins an order of mendicant brothers, monks who live in poverty and depend on outside contributions for subsistence.
Aristocratic.
If there's such a thing as Texas aristocracy, well, you're looking at it right here.
Aristocratic, the adjective form of aristocracy, means of noble birth, very refined, or just acting that way. Jean-Claude was flat broke, but people thought he was rich because of his aristocratic bearing and the way he bossed around the waiters.
Destitute.
Now I'm almost destitute. I have only the clothes on my back and a used '79 Cadillac Seville.
Destitute means completely and utterly without means, be they financial or otherwise. Without her grandmother to bake for her, Little Red Riding Hood was destitute.
And that covers rich man, poor man. Now it's time for the very last group of words.
The last group is called, appropriately, the rise and fall.
Why appropriately?
Because,
Why?
Liz,
Dick?
just go with me on this.
Okay.
Okay.
So, what are the words?
We'll start with the rise words, and the first one up is preeminent. Even though he recently retired, there can be no doubt that Michael Jordan is the world's preeminent basketball player.
Preeminent means simply the best, outstanding, supreme. By winning the Nobel Prize for Literature, Toni Morrison establishes herself as one of the preeminent writers of the world. You've always said that she was the best.
Preeminence, that's the noun, is tough to come by in any field, but in a field like writing or basketball where the competition is already incredibly tough and the standards so high, only the most extraordinary people can gain preeminence.
Transcend means to go beyond or above, to surpass. Ah, transcend. The pianist's virtuosity is so stunning that he seems to have transcended merely playing beautifully. It's as if the music were flowing directly out of his hands. His playing was, and this is the adjective, transcendent.
Ubiquitous means being everywhere at the same time. Personal computers, once a rarity, have become ubiquitous. They're everywhere. It's a peculiarity of American life that ubiquity, once again that's the noun, is the chief measure of a person's success.
Whether a performer, a writer, or even a fast food chain, it seems that only by being everywhere all at once, by being ubiquitous, can one really claim success. And those people or products which cease to be ubiquitous are therefore considered old news.
Only those who can hang on for the long haul will prevail. To prevail means to triumph or overcome great odds or rivals. In the race for the title of foulest mouth in the West, Cussin' Connie prevailed for the 5th year in a row. That makes her the prevailing cusser in all the West.
When something is prevailing, as in the prevailing winds, they are predominant or the most frequent.
When you use prevail with certain prepositions, namely upon, on, or with, it takes on a different meaning, which is to persuade. Sam prevailed upon Misha to make the bed. I'll belt you one if you don't, said Sam. Misha made the bed.
Hubris is arrogance or excessive pride. It's a word most of us first learn in English class because hubris is all too often the character flaw that brings a tragic hero in a play or novel to his tragic end. Hubris may not always be a bad thing, though. Some might argue that it was hubris that led Columbus to risk everything to prove, against all prevailing opinion, that the world was round, or that without hubris, man would never have made it to the moon.
Perhaps we should move on to the next word before they start playing the national anthem or something. Let's look at sovereign, shall we?
We shall. Sovereign, in its noun form, means supreme ruler or monarch. I am the sovereign of my house, all 200 square feet of it. The king and queen are the sovereigns of England, even though their opinions don't count for much. Lenny's dog Butchie is the sovereign of the dog run. No other dog will challenge him.
Of course, sovereign can also be used as an adjective, in which case it means principal or foremost. So, is a sovereign truly sovereign if they have no sovereignty?
That's another good question, Dick. So good, in fact, that I can't answer it. Just remember that a sovereign is a ruler or monarch. Something sovereign is foremost or principal, and sovereignty is supreme authority. Get it?
Got it.
Good. Next word. Regime. A regime is a governing power, a system of government, or a period during which a government is in power.
Danny, sick of his father's inability to run the household, has taken over the house, proclaiming a new regime. Danny makes the rules from now on, starting with no more prune juice for breakfast.
The evil island leader vowed that he would die before he saw his regime toppled. As a despotic dictator, he was none too anxious to give up hegemony over his people. Right now, Japan and Germany are vying for hegemony in a war of a different kind, the foreign car market. After so many years as allies, now they find themselves in competition for world automobile dominance.
Hegemony means leadership or dominance of one thing over another. What do you say we wrap up this half of the group?
Very well. Preeminent.
The best, supreme, better than all the rest.
Transcend.
To go above and beyond, to go higher.
Ubiquitous.
Everywhere at the same time.
Hubris.
Arrogance or excessive pride.
Regime.
Ruling government or system of government, the period during which a government is in power.
Hegemony.
Leadership or dominance of one thing over another.
Prevail.
To triumph or overcome. When used with upon, on, or with, it means to persuade.
Sovereign.
Ruler or monarch. As an adjective, it means the most important.
Well, that's that. And now it's speaker time. And who better to let us in on how words like sovereign and prevail might sound out there in the real world than a man who's known only success, only power, and only triumph.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes. Ladies and gents, won't you please welcome the captain of the team, the man voted most likely to succeed, the president of Phi Epsilon Delta for the 3rd year in a row. You all know him as Russ the Bus, Russell Mayer.
Hey there, how's it going, dudes? Welcome to Phi Epsilon Delta's pep rally. Hey man, grab a brewski. Listen up, I just want to say a few words about what I got planned this year, guys. Thanks. I don't have to tell you how important it is for Phi Epsilon Delta to maintain its hegemony over the other frats on campus. That dominance is essential if we want to keep getting funded by the alums. And I have every reason to believe that we will remain the preeminent frat on campus, the absolute best. But I do have the sense that some of you guys are getting a little lazy. And who could blame you? I mean, look at us. Our house is the coolest, our teams are the winningest, and our parties are the best. And we are everywhere. Our presence is ubiquitous. I mean, we rule this campus. We are sovereign, and everybody knows that. But if we take that for granted, if we let foolish pride blind us to what our enemies are up to, we might just find that our hubris will be our downfall. Now, as you all know, this is my senior year and I can't be president after I graduate. So, at long last, my regime will come to an end and someone else will take over as your leader. Well, that's cool. But in my last year as president, I would like to see Phi Epsilon Delta go beyond last year's achievements. I want us to transcend the heights that we ourselves have already pioneered. I want every dweeb on this campus to bow at our feet. To be strong is not enough anymore, my brothers. I want us to triumph. I don't want us merely to survive. I want us to prevail. And conquer we will. Now, party on, men.
Yikes, he's a charmer. What now?
Well, with the inexorable force of time pushing us towards our final destination, we should present the final subgroup, the fall words from The Rise and Fall.
Okay, here's the first word. Debunk. Now, despite how it sounds, debunk does not mean to get out of bed. When you debunk something, you expose it for the nonsense that it really is. After months of research, the reporter debunked the power company's claim that they were not dumping radioactive waste into the river. So what if the reporter grew a third eye? He did a good thing.
So to debunk something is to show that it's bunk or nonsense. How's that for a mnemonic? If something is bunk, then it should be debunked. Debunk.
Perhaps we should look at rout.
To rout is to cause a huge defeat, to put to flight, to make scatter. Surprisingly enough, the football team from the High School of Performing Arts routed the team from Polytech. There was a 17-point spread. Who knew they had such a good football team with the High School of Performing Arts?
Yeah, but the guys from Polytech were not happy. Being routed by a bunch of singers and dancers wasn't in their plan, if you know what I mean. I hope they don't do something silly like go looking for revenge.
Well, from what I hear, those guys can handle themselves. If the team from Polytech comes after them, they're likely to be routed off the field in the same way they were on the field.
You can also use rout as a noun, too. The football game was a rout.
Our next word is depose. The hardest part about that game was that not only were the boys from Polytech routed by those from Performing Arts, but in losing, Polytech was deposed from first place. To depose is to remove from position or office.
The disgruntled employee took it upon himself to depose his boss. He went into her office, took her by the hair, and dragged her to the trash chute, where he gave her a quickie tour of all of the building's 50 stories.
America is one of the few countries in the world where the leader is regularly deposed in a peaceful process. Usually a leader is deposed by force against his will.
Well, not this leader. No, sir, I'll not soon be deposed. I'll hold my position, I will.
What position?
Nothing, don't worry about it. Just give us the next word, okay?
Okay, here it is. Succumb, which means to submit, to yield, or even sometimes to die.
The Martians in H.G. Wells' The War of the Worlds survived every military weapon known to man, only to succumb to the common cold.
Alex pleaded for Lucretia to return his love. Only after 10 years and 3 failed marriages did she finally succumb. And even then, while she was willing to return his love, she never did give him back his dignity. It seems that after all that, she was only able to love him after seeing him degraded.
To degrade is to lower in dignity or status, to corrupt, to deteriorate. Being made to perform menial duties at the behest of overbearing male senior partners clearly degrades the law firm's female associates.
Michael felt degraded to the status of a mere sex object by Wendy's insistence that, when in the house, he wear nothing but a hot dog bun. But he loved her enough to comply. The problem was finding a way of keeping it on.
The former bank president felt degraded by working as a teller, but since he was released from jail, it's the only gig he could get. The nutritional value of milk degrades when exposed to light. The act of degrading something is called degradation. Next word. Oust, which means to expel, to eject, to banish. Robbie was ousted from the Scouts for setting the troop mascot on fire.
Raisa was ousted from Alpha 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 when she was discovered in flagrante in the rumpus room with an unidentified stranger. But not long after her ouster, she vowed she'd find a way back into the sorority.
When someone is ousted, it's called an ouster.
Once the faculty learned that the president was corrupt, they went right to work planning his ouster. They went ahead and ousted him. Now, there's no way gracefully to segue into our last word, so allow me just to introduce it directly. Diminution.
Diminution is the act or process of diminishing. Reduction is a good synonym.
The diminution of my savings account means that I am not as wealthy as I used to be. A related word is diminutive, which means very small, or a word that diminishes something. At 300 pounds, for example, diminutives such as cute little thing didn't seem to stick to Horshaw.
Percy didn't appreciate the diminution of his relationship to Minnie. To call 12 years of marriage a good date seemed to diminish its importance.
The steady diminution of his follicles meant that baldness was an inevitability. And with that optimistic example, we come to the last definition for the fall words from the Rise and Fall. That's it. Those are all the words we're going to define on WordSmart 2.
Very well, then let's recap them so that nobody forgets what they mean.
Do let's.
You start.
No, you.
I must insist.
I couldn't possibly.
Very well, then. If that's how you truly feel, I shall begin.
Oh.
Okay. Here goes. Degrade.
To lower in dignity or status. To corrupt or deteriorate.
Debunk.
To reveal as nonsense.
Depose.
To remove from office or position of power.
Diminution.
A reduction or diminishment.
Oust.
To eject, throw out, or reject.
Rout.
To cause a huge defeat, to put to flight, to scatter.
Succumb.
To give in, to yield, to die.
Well, that takes care of the recap. So now we have but to listen to one more speaker so we can really get the feel of the words from the fall half of the Rise and Fall.
Well, who is it?
Someone very special.
Who? Do I know him or her?
Oh, yes you do, Dick.
I do? Who is it?
Remember that family of little mice you chased out of your apartment? Well, one of them has a name, Dick, and a story to tell.
Oh, God.
That's right, Dick. Here to use the fall words in context is Ricky, the mouse you chased out of your house last winter. Ricky?
Yeah, thanks, Liz. That's right, Dick. I'm the little mouse that you kicked out. You ousted me from the warmth of our little home in the dead of winter. Was that any way for you to treat a helpless little family of mice? I hate to debunk what must be dearly held beliefs, Dick, but that stuff about mice being bad is pure nonsense. We're okay. We don't mean anybody any harm. It makes us feel bad when people say we're dirty. It's degrading, I tell you. I mean, look at me. I'm a family man. Sure, I'm small, but being diminutive is no sin. My heart is as big as yours, I bet. Maybe even bigger. I'd never run your family out of the house in the middle of a blizzard. I don't understand why you think we mice are out to take over. I mean, you're our meal ticket. A man's home is his castle, and I'd never want to depose you from your throne. We just want your crumbs. But when you hide the food and put out those traps and that poison, I teach my kids not to go near that stuff. But when they're starving, even the best educated mouse is bound to succumb. When your stomach is growling, you give in. And give in they did. My whole family. It was a rout. Not one of us got away without at least an injury. Now won't you kindly let us back in? I'm begging you, Dick. It's cold out here. Let us come home.
Not a chance, rat.
Oh, Dick, now be nice. The little guy just wants to come home.
Forget it. Don't even bother. Let's just do the final review and call it a book. On tape.
Well, okay. It's your conscience after all.
Fine. Once again, here's how we're going to run this. You get the word from the rise or the fall group. Then you get a pause.
During the pause, think of the definition, or at least the category for that word. Then comes the monologue, the definition, and the final example sentence.
And that's it. Then it's off to dreamland to make the vocabulary words one with your imaginations.
Easy there, Dick. Let's skip the pretty pictures and just do the drill. You ready?
I'm ready. You start.
Degrade. It makes us feel bad when people say we're dirty. It's degrading, I tell you.
To degrade is to lower in dignity or status, to corrupt or deteriorate. Cinderella found it degrading to stay at home when her wicked stepsisters went off to the ball. Luckily, her fairy godmother stepped in.
Sovereign.
I mean, we rule this campus. We are sovereign, and everybody knows that.
A sovereign is a ruler or monarch. As an adjective, it means the most important. For Glenn, food is sovereign in his life. He won't do anything before he eats.
Debunk.
I hate to debunk what must be dearly held beliefs, Dick, but that stuff about mice being bad is pure nonsense.
To debunk is to reveal as nonsense. Most kids are naturally suspicious and are not surprised when the myth of Santa Claus is debunked.
Prevail.
I want us to triumph. I don't want us to merely survive. I want us to prevail, and conquer we will.
To prevail is to triumph or overcome. When used with upon, on, or with, it means to persuade. Maria prevailed upon Brunhilde to lend her the cashmere halter top.
Depose.
A man's home is his castle, and I'd never want to depose you from your throne.
To depose is to remove from office or position of power. Miss America would have been deposed from her throne if she hadn't declined to pose for those risque photos.
Hubris.
But if we take that for granted, if we let foolish pride blind us to what our enemies are up to, we might just find that our hubris will be our downfall.
Hubris is arrogance or excessive pride. John's hubris as a salesman frequently lost him many potential clients because he boasted insufferably.
Diminution.
Sure, I'm small, but being diminutive is no sin. My heart is as big as yours, I bet, maybe even bigger.
Diminution is a reduction or diminishment. Diminutive means small, petite. Mary Lou Retton may be diminutive, but she sure is a firecracker. Oust.
I'm the little mouse that you kicked out. You ousted me from the warmth of our little home in the dead of winter.
To oust is to eject, throw out, or reject. When he told the umpire he was a schnook, the first baseman was ousted from the game.
Hegemony.
I don't have to tell you how important it is for Phi Epsilon Delta to maintain its hegemony over the other frats on campus. That dominance is essential if we want to keep getting funded by the alums.
Hegemony means leadership or dominance of one thing over another. Women have suffered for centuries under the hegemony of patriarchal societies.
Rout.
It was a rout. Not one of us got away without at least an injury.
To rout is to cause a huge defeat, to put to flight, to scatter. The Visigoths were routed by the Huns. They were totally wiped out.
Preeminent.
And I have every reason to believe that we will remain the preeminent frat on campus, the absolute best.
Preeminent means the best, supreme, better than all the rest. Picasso was the preeminent painter of his generation, if not of the whole century. Succumb. But when they're starving, even the best educated mouse is bound to succumb. When your stomach is growling, you give in.
To succumb is to give in, to yield, to die. After 3 years, Helena finally succumbed to Lewis's charms.
Transcend.
I would like to see Phi Epsilon Delta go beyond last year's achievements. I want us to transcend the heights that we ourselves have already pioneered.
To transcend is to go above and beyond, to go higher. Mozart transcended all other classical composers. He redefined the heights to which music can rise. Ubiquitous.
And we're everywhere. Our presence is ubiquitous. Ubiquitous means everywhere at the same time. Madonna has been a ubiquitous presence for these many years. She's in every magazine you see in the doctor's office.
Regime.
Now, as you all know, this is my senior year and I can't be president after I graduate. So, at long last, my regime will come to an end and someone else will take over as your leader.
A regime is a ruling government or system of government. Also, it's the period during which a government is in power. The Marcos regime in the Philippines was toppled because Imelda had too many shoes, among other reasons.
Well, I don't think a person can have too many shoes, but hey, who am I to say? Anyway, that about wraps things up for the rise and fall, Liz. Goodbye, and good luck.